Welcome to the SecureWorld Sessions. We're a cybersecurity podcast that is all about access.
Access granted.
Access to people and ideas that can impact your career and help you secure your organization. Hello there, my name is Bruce Sussman, and I am Director of Content at SecureWorld and also your podcast host. And in today's session, we're talking to nationally known cyber attorney Shawn Tuma.
There really is no other issue that I think rises above cyber in importance to the organization. And why is that? I mean, what we know about cyber is there is no such thing as being completely secure when you're dealing with things in the cyber world. At some level, someone somehow using some technique or tool, if they really want to bad enough, can probably get into just about anything that's out there.
And new research from Trend Micro reveals that is true, even when it comes to smart factories and the industrial Internet of Things. We'll be covering that later on. Trend Micro is our premier podcast partner. Now, on to our featured interview of episode 35. Your incident response team cheered after its most successful tabletop exercise in the history of your security operation. But the mood changes as that same quarter, your organization gets hit by ransomware. Fortunately, you'd printed your plan. A good move, since that file on your server is now encrypted. And thankfully, your organization has cyber insurance, so you can call in some much needed help, your most trusted vendors. Suddenly, though, it's as if time stops ticking. You get a call from legal, and it turns out the vendors you want to use for incident response and recovery are out of network. Just like your health insurance, many cyber insurance policies have in-network and out-of-network level of coverages, while others require you to use specific vendors or go without coverage at all. Cyber attorney Shawn Tuma says this is just one of the cyber insurance surprises that cybersecurity leaders and organizations are discovering in the midst of an incident. So what do you need to know about this topic? Tuma will unpack it for us, but first, he offers a level set on cyber risk as he sees it.
One of the points I've tried to make over the years is that cyber is no longer just a technical issue. It's a legal issue, which is why I'm here in one way. And it's also an overall business risk issue. And, you know, as I've thought about it, you know, I've talked to business executives and I've told them of how important this business risk issue is. And it really dawned on me one day that I cannot think of any other risk that businesses regularly face where the CEO can go to sleep tonight, you know, and lay his head on his plush, beautiful pillows with the company running well, doing fine production operations going, and then wake up tomorrow morning to find they're completely out of business because of an event that happened overnight, such as a ransomware attack. And we see that, by the way, on a regular basis, you know, with these kind of ransomware attacks. But it's the one risk that I know of right now, other than maybe nuclear war, where in one night, everything can change and can completely impact your operations. So today, as I say this, and we're sitting here in the world of coronavirus, and we're all probably sitting in our homes watching or doing this, this has been a pretty big impact. And it's been a big impact on business, but it didn't happen overnight. You know, it took days. So even in this frame of reference that we're looking in right now, I think a ransomware attack on a business can still be more profound than what we're experiencing right now with the coronavirus.
That's really an amazing contrast, isn't it? I mean, when it feels like the coronavirus came on suddenly, but not as suddenly as a cyber attack. Wow. Well, Tuma, who I spoke with on a recent SecureWorld web conference, told me resilience is the key to surviving an attack, and he uses ransomware as an example.
And I talk a lot about ransomware because we deal with so many ransomware cases. As you know, breach counsel and leading that process. But there are going to be losses. And so when we're thinking about that, the key is to be resilient. And I've used many different examples over the years of quotes that I think summed up resilience. But I think the great, profound philosopher Rocky Balboa really nailed it. Now I'm going to stop and let y'all laugh for a second there. The profound philosopher Rocky Balboa nailed the environment that we're in right now. And that is, it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. And in today's environment, I think that's how we have to approach it. We're going to get some hits, but can we stay operational? Can we keep our business moving forward and deal with those hits in a way that isn't going to be catastrophic to us? And so then the question is, how do we become more resilient? And in my experience, and I've been in cyber law for 20 plus years now that I've been dealing with various forms of cyber issues, but serving in the incident response capacity, which is where most of my work is right now, there are two things that I have found to be absolutely critical to the resilience of a company when they get a hit. So how well they can handle and respond to those hits. And one is cyber insurance. Cyber insurance is what pays for you to do what you need to do to have a proper response. And what I mean by that is, when you get one of these attacks, even a ransomware attack, when you have your backups, you're still going to have a hit. You're going to have many times the time it takes to move and make, execute and restore those backups. So it's going to be some sort of a delay. There's some sort of a problem in most cases, but it doesn't have to be catastrophic. And the key to responding to an incident, or an intrusion into your network that maybe is exfiltrating data, is how quickly can you identify it and stop it and do the things you need to do to keep what is a small matter from becoming a really big matter. And the key to that is your ability to properly respond. And many times that means bringing in professionals to help with that, bringing in a team of combination of cyber forensics, security, decryption, what have you, to help. And especially for small and mid-sized business, that ability to bring in that team very quickly and on a moment's notice is a tremendous differentiator between a successful response and an unsuccessful one that leads to problems. And many times the only way a company has the resources to be able to do that is by having the cyber insurance coverage available to pay, because I can promise you, as much as I love what I do, I don't do it for free.
So cyber insurance is crucial, according to Tuma. Next, he explains how incident response planning should look, including some crucial details.
And that is, that's how you know what you need to do, when you need to do it, who is doing what, and how. And it's critical, because time is of the essence when something adverse happens and you've got to start dealing with it. The basic process for our incident response planning, from where I see it, which is in my legal and my breach counsel role, is you've got to determine your leaders, who are going to be the leaders of the process, who are your key internal and your key external players that are going to be involved. You develop your incident response plan. This includes developing the communication protocols and the retention of your external players, the people you're going to be counting on, whether it's your managed services provider, your security forensics firm, your decryption firm, notification vendor, public relations, and of course, your legal firm. Getting all those people on board, getting your engagement agreements in place, getting your communications, your telephone number, your mobile number, your email, your backup number, your backup email, all these things in place and getting them ready to go. Because I'll tell you what I have found out of all the incident responses that we've led over the years is the single most important part of any incident response plan that we look to is that page dealing with communications. It's knowing who the players are and knowing how to reach them on a moment's notice. That is the most important part that we ever need because, we generally have a pretty good idea of what we need to do. And we're learning that in real time oftentimes. But having the ability to reach the people we need to reach and get them engaged quickly is really what I find to be most critical. And so, then the next step is you educate your players on their roles. You have practice, like any good team. You do that through your tabletop exercises, and then you refine your plan, get prepared to execute it when you need to. So that's the process.
So we've talked about the incident response plan and why you need cyber insurance. Coming up, Tuma reveals the surprises many companies find as they read their insurance policies at the start of an incident and how to prevent those surprises. That is in just a minute. Each week here on the podcast, we are privileged to share new cybersecurity research because of our partnership with Trend Micro. And this week, we're talking about a study that is hot off the presses. It's called Threats and Consequences, a security analysis of smart manufacturing systems. And this research is where we're getting today's Trend Micro Top 3. Number 1, attacks against smart factories are becoming more sophisticated, and these factories will see Trojanized attacks against industrial IoT devices. Number 2, data mangling will occur against manufacturing execution systems, or MESs. This will lead to malfunctioning in the manufacture of goods. And number 3, mobile human-machine interface, or HMI apps, will be exploited to gain access. These exist in a closed, wired network where the trust between an HMI and the rest of the system is a given. But now attackers can take advantage of this trust by finding a weakness in a mobile HMI. By the way, if you're a visual learner, don't miss this report because it's full of great charts that make it easy to understand the threat against the IIoT. I've linked to the research in the show notes, and thanks to Trend Micro for being our premier podcast partner. Now, back to our interview with cyber attorney Shawn Tuma of law firm Spencer Fane. He's about to explain how your cyber insurance could drastically change your incident response plan during an incident. After you hear this, you will want to check your policy.
So you take the lead in your company on the incident response planning. You go through the effort of creating this incident response plan. You set up your agreements with all your external players, get them ready to go, signed up. You develop your communications protocols, train the incident response team on their roles and responsibilities, and you practice. Now you are ready to go. You're like Rocky going in there to knock out the big Russian. You're just tuned up and ready to go on a moment's notice. You get word you have an incident. While you're not exactly excited about that, you are glad that you have this plan in place. You activate your plan, you begin execution. Only then do you discover that not only does your company have cyber insurance, but that insurance policy specifically dictates what vendor or professional service firms you can use And none of those approved vendors are the ones that you included on your external incident response team. Okay? That's a problem. So here you are. You need to be calling that cybersecurity firm, that forensics firm, right now to get them in to deploy whatever tools they're going to deploy to determine what's going on in your network. But they're not on your team. You need that all-important breach counsel. We know a few, and need them involved so you can get your agreement in place, start your attorney-client privileged investigation. Turns out the one you had written down that you called isn't able to help. What do you do? So instead of executing your plan with your team you had planned to use, now you've got to get on the phone with your insurance carrier, and you got to get on the phone and start finding out what vendors are available, or you've got to start the negotiations with the carrier to determine if you can use the people you have in place. And if you don't, you're jeopardizing your coverage, and you're jeopardizing having the insurance company pay for all of those incident response costs. It doesn't mean you can't get it worked out, but it means you're taking on a mighty big risk because you may not be able to. So let's look at where this problem started. When you began your incident response preparation, you did not know, does your company even have cyber insurance? And sadly, most of you on this call probably in the technical side of things within your organization. And they didn't even include you or don't include you in that procurement process, even though you have a critical role in acquiring your cyber insurance. Many times our technical folks aren't even being included in this discussion. And that's crazy because those applications require a lot of information about what your company's doing or not doing. And without your input, they're not able to accurately answer that. So you need to be involved in that process. But unfortunately, right now, you don't even know. You didn't know what was generally covered or not covered under the policy. You didn't know how quickly your notifications must be given to your carrier, especially for getting pre-approvals, which are the norm before you take steps such as paying a ransom or hiring or you don't know how to give notice to your carrier. You don't even know what your policy number is or who the carrier is. We have seen these cases where everything involving cyber insurance is left on the network when you're dealing with a ransomware case. And so you literally cannot get to the information you need to put people on notice and make a proper claim. You don't know if you're allowed to select your vendors, whether they must be approved or not. The pre-approval issue. So in other words, you didn't understand the interaction between your cyber insurance coverage and your incident response planning, and that is a very common problem. So why does this occur? Well, first, we do encounter this a lot, and I absolutely hate it, especially whenever it's people who are calling me and it turns out they have insurance with someone who's not going to work with us or we're not pre-approved. And because of that, the first question I usually ask at the beginning of an incident response engagement is, do you have cyber insurance? And if you do, who is the carrier? Because what I don't want to do is I don't want to waste their time or mine going through a lot of discussion if I know good and well they're going to have to go and have that same conversation again with someone else. It's just wasting their time, and time is the most precious thing they have in that scenario. So why is it happening? There are now over 100 different insurance carriers that are writing these cyber insurance policies, and those policies vary greatly in many respects. One of the most significant respects is how the policy addresses the use of vendors and professional service providers under that policy. So I'm referring to your cyber, your forensics firms, public relations firms, your notification vendors. These are the people who do the mailings and provide the credit product, set up the call centers, all those things, your forensics accountants when you need them, and of course your legal breach counsel. All of those are vendors that are typically used and that the policies specifically address in many cases who can and can't. So ultimately, the problem we're seeing comes down to not knowing your policy, and without knowing your policy, not being able to do effective incident response planning. Because the key to that is knowing who's on your team. And if you don't know who's on your team, you can't move forward from there. And again, when we're in this situation, for anyone who's been in an incident response, for a significant incident, that nerves, patience, time, those are the key things you need right now. And time and that pressure is the one pushing all of it. And the last thing you need to be doing is fooling around with this kind of stuff. So let's look at a couple of the different approaches that these different policies have. Because, while I like some, I don't like others for various reasons. There are good reasons why these policies are being written in these ways. And it really is to give the consumers, the businesses out there, the choice so they can get the right policy for their needs. Here are a few of the more common approaches. One is absolutely no restrictions. You can use any vendor you choose. The policy doesn't even address that issue. There are those policies. They're not very common, but they are out there. Two is you can choose the vendor, but the carrier will want to vet and approve who that vendor is going to be before signing off and saying, have at it, you can use them. Three is you can choose your own vendors as opposed to the panel vendors, but you're going to have a financial incentive to go with the panel vendors. There's one carrier in particular that I'm thinking of that will allow you to use your own vendors not approved, but your policy limits are reduced by 50%. So if you have $5 million in coverage, you will then only have $2.5 million in coverage if you go off panel. Three, pre-approval of vendors you choose before there's an incident. So let's say you decide, as you're sitting here thinking that there's a security firm that you really want on your team, you already have a policy. If you go and approach them now before you have an incident, the odds are much better that you can get them written into that policy so that they can be on your team. But I would note that it's usually a lot easier to do this during the procurement process before you pay the money. We all understand why, because when people are trying to get a deal closed, they're a lot of times much more willing to negotiate and take care of those things. And then there are the very strict approach where the carrier absolutely will not allow anyone to you to use any vendor that's not on their approved panel. And there's a very good reason for that one. And it's one I didn't understand until recently when I had a conversation with the head of that carrier that I'm thinking of. And the reason is all your vendor costs typically are paid for out of your cyber insurance policy. So if you have a $5 million policy and all of your vendors end up being $250,000 in fees, that erodes your policy. For this one particular carrier that will not allow you to go off panel on this policy, their vendor fees do not erode their coverage limits. And so because they're basically eating those costs, they have a very strong incentive to make absolutely sure their vendors are working at very, probably preferable rates and follow the process that they put in place. Now, most of you probably hear this and say, I don't want to give up that kind of control over my incident response. Well, at the same time, there are a lot of other people who are thinking, you know what, I like knowing that there's a team in place that knows what they're doing and that knows how to manage this, and I don't have the capability to do it myself, so that is a good thing. So the point is, there are a lot of different approaches. You need to pick the one that's right for you and your situation.
So what's in your wallet? I mean, what's in your cyber insurance policy? now's the time to find out and plan ahead. Thanks so much, Shawn, for your willingness to inform the security community on issues like these. And by the way, Shawn was the 2019 SecureWorld Advisory Member of the Year. That is our highest honor here at SecureWorld. And by listening to him, you can probably tell why. He just does so much for the community. Well, thanks again to Trend Micro for sponsoring today's podcast, and to our show editor, Pete, for his continued work and excellence. And on behalf of the entire SecureWorld team, I'm Bruce Sussman, your host of the SecureWorld Sessions. Let's catch up again on Tuesday.